Hey, Rich, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you. Thanks.
You got it.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our e-learning webinar on improving online assessment. My name is Ginny McGee, and I'm an instructional designer in the e-learning division here at the college. And what I'm going to do today is kind of give you an overview of some of the options in Canvas and outside of Canvas for conducting assessments. And we'll look at what works, what doesn't, some of the challenges and advantages of assessing online. And we'll look at some alternatives to the standard testing types of assessments that we see so often in higher education, as well as ways that you can make your test type assessments more effective. So before we get started, I would like for you to find the chat and usually it may be over on the side of your screen. You may have to expand the little menu, but if you wouldn't mind just typing in a little yes or hi, just to let me know that you can hear me. All right, thanks, Martine. She says she can hear me, and Judith, appreciate it. So hi, Nancy, welcome. All right, great. So it looks like audio is working well. So if at any point in time you have a question and you want to ask it, you can type it into the chat area. What I'm going to probably do is get through the presentation, and then at the end, we will have plenty of time to answer any questions that you may have. I do have my colleague, Rich Cummings, our e-learning technician, with us today to help me monitor the chat. So we'll be happy to answer any questions that come up or that you may have during the presentation. So I am, in just a minute, I will unmute you for a quick sort of discussion, just kind of get a little bit of feedback from all of you. So if you have a microphone, if you don't mind unmuting it, or you can also use the chat for that as well, but just sort of a heads up in case anybody is needing to get prepared for that. And then also, I do want to say that a lot of the things that we're talking about today, I'm going to kind of mention them, but if you're needing more information, like specifically on how to use certain features of Canvas that I mentioned, I want to point out that a lot of or pretty much all of these things are provided in the Canvas Faculty Hub. So there's resources when I talk about creating tests and things like that. Unfortunately, we don't have time to demonstrate all of that today, but I do want to make sure that everyone knows that this information is in the hub. And quickly, I want to just kind of show you, I did add a couple of you that I saw to the Canvas Faculty Hub. So in case you haven't been in here before, this is what the Canvas Faculty Hub looks like. You'll see the tile for it on your dashboard. And when you click on it, if you click on the resources button or the modules button, this is where you're going to find the information that I'm talking about today. So for example, when we talk about quizzes and new quizzes, we'll talk about lockdown browser and unit check, all of these items. There's plenty of resources in here, training guides and tutorials, videos, those types of things that'll help you learn how to use these things that I'm talking about if you don't know how to already. And then also, I want to point out that our recorded webinars from in the past are in this recorded webinars tab. So you can watch the first two from the Quality Matters series that Rose is doing. And then, of course, as soon as we get done today, once that recording is ready, I'll put that in here for you too. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows where to find all of those items. Okay. And get going here. One more quick thing. So there is a next Tuesday, there is a webinar on using the Canvas court template that Rich is going to be doing. And then on the 27th is the fourth part of the Quality Matters and Course Design series that Rose has been doing. And so I do want to make sure that everybody knows that those are coming up. Those are both at 2:15 on those days as well. All right, so let's look at our agenda here quickly. So we're going to talk about online assessment, the challenges that are kind of inherent to online assessment, as well as advantages, some that you're probably very aware of and others that you may not have thought of before. We're going to look at the assessment tools that are built into Canvas. We're going to look at some alternative assessment ideas. So thinking a little bit outside the box from just looking at tests and quizzes. We'll look at academic integrity, which I know is always a big concern for every instructor, and ways that we can help to try to ensure academic integrity, and that will be kind of talked about throughout the presentation as well. And then we'll look at some best practices for online assessment. Okay, so I'm going to put the ball in your court here for just a second. So I want everyone to kind of just think about your own course or courses. And if you teach more than one, which many of you do, then you can pick one if you'd like. And I just want you to take a minute to think about the best thing you do in your course or program. And when I say thing, it could be anything. So it doesn't have to be a test or an assessment. It could be an activity. It could be anything that you just kind of think is the thing that works the best in your course or program. And then I want you to think about, how do you know it's the best? And how do you know it's effective? So I want you to think about that for just a second. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow anyone that would like to share. So we'll let you think for just a minute before I unmute everybody. So if anybody would like to, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Or if you prefer to type in your response, you can do that as well. Okay, so I think that Martine is saying immediate interaction in class is one of the best things in her courses. And so I can totally understand that, being a language instructor, being able to have that immediate interaction. And that's something that is easier for sure to do in a lot of situations in person rather than online. Does anybody else want to share? And if not, that's okay. So just as long as you kind of have something in mind. All right, so someone else shared, every 2 weeks, I post a 2-week overview for students to quickly get a rundown of what that 2-week interval looks like. Okay, so I love that. So for students to be able to see what's coming up and get an overview, and students really appreciate that. Okay, so that's awesome. Anybody else want to share? And also just thinking about how do we know that these things are effective? And I think in some cases, it's probably, if you are in a situation in a classroom where you're immediately communicating with someone, it might be a little bit easier to see that. So I want to kind of ask, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but is a test anybody's best thing that they do? Because we want to think a little bit outside the box here today. All right, so like someone said, nope, LOL. So just asking if anyone's best thing they do or most effective thing is a test. Okay, so So tests aren't probably going to be your favorite part of teaching. So someone said an oral test is one of the best things they do. So that's perfect. So obviously, and it doesn't mean that the test couldn't be the best thing that you do, but just kind of thinking about the best ways that you are able to tell that students are achieving those student learning objectives and that they're being successful in their courses. And if our goal at the end of the day is for students to learn and be successful at the material, thinking about how we can use those things that we are best at, that have the best results, maybe more, and then try to make our tests a little bit better so that they reflect those best practices a little bit better. All right, so let's go ahead and move on here. So if we think about the types of assessment, and these are just three of the types of assessment, probably the main three that you think of. But if you look up the types of assessment, you'll find ones that are beyond the ones listed here. But we kind of want to just look at these three. And pre-assessment, we're not going to focus on that one as much today, but of course that's going to be basically a pre-test so you can see where your students are, what they already know, what kind of foundation they're coming in with or starting a unit or a chapter with. And then of course, formative assessment, so important, providing feedback to students on their progress in reaching those student learning objectives, and also helping to inform your future instructions so that you know what you need to go back over and what's working for you and for the students. And then of course, summative assessment. So summative is going to evaluate the student learning at the end of the course or at the end of a chapter or a unit of study. And summative assessments are usually higher stakes than formative assessments. They're going to be your big exams or big project that kind of is the culmination of everything that the students have learned. And we're going to focus more, as I said, on the formative and the summative assessment today. And we're going to look at some ways that we can think outside the box a little bit. So let's look at our challenges that are sort of inherent to online assessment. So, of course, and a lot of these are really a concern for testing in any environment. Validity. So I'll bring up student learning objectives, of course, a lot throughout this presentation, because that's what we're always going back to when we create assessments. Are we measuring what the students, how the students are progressing in mastering those SLOs? And so we want to make sure that the assessment is valid. Is it accurately assessing the students' progress? Accessibility, that's always a concern within any learning environment, but if you are teaching in an online environment, it might be a little easier to overlook because the student's needs and disabilities might not be as apparent. So we want to, of course, make sure that our online courses and online assessments are accessible to everyone. And then especially if there are students that have accommodations and things like that, we of course need to make sure that those are being addressed as well. And then the third one, cheating. So let's be blunt. This is probably the biggest concern that instructors have about online assessment. And so we'll look at some alternative assessments that can make cheating more difficult and tools to just help ensure academic integrity a little later in the presentation. And then finally, technology. So technology can present problems with just it not working right or people not knowing how to use it. But another issue is that students that are taking online classes here at Camden County College are not issued a standard device. So we've got a whole wide range of devices that they're using to access the course and to take assessments. And older, less robust technology can present challenges. And so those are some things that I think cause anxiety for instructors and students both when they're looking at taking an exam or taking a class online. So let's look at the built-in advantages. And I don't know why, but that made me laugh. It's not 100% relevant, this meme here, but I thought, well, at least that's an advantage of taking an assessment online. No one's going to hear your stomach growling in the middle of a test. But some of the others are going to be flexibility, which is a huge one in all facets of online learning. So students can take an online assessment at a time that works best for them, at the time of day that they are the most focused and are at their best. A big one, and one that maybe doesn't get used as much as it could be, is data. So built-in tools in Canvas and also in Publisher software can make it pretty easy to get kind of a snapshot and see what students are struggling, maybe what areas have provided a challenge for the majority of the class that you might need to review or sort of tweak how you're teaching that particular content. And then what individual questions or student learning objectives there might have a need for individual or groups to have some tutoring or to have some extra help with. And then this third item here is, so results are not permanent. They are stored in Canvas, I want to say indefinitely. Now, do not count on student work being there forever, but it's going to be unlike a paper and pencil test that you either collect and then probably put away somewhere, or you return to students and never see again. The results of the students' tests are going to be stored in Canvas, at least for a little while. We've been with Canvas for 3 years now and haven't had to overwrite any of our archived courses yet. So again, I don't want you to take this as these things are going to be available for all time, but they are available for at least a while after the conclusion of a course. So it's kind of nice, I think, for instructors to be able to look back at past courses and get an idea of what worked in a past class to kind of tweak and inform their instruction for a current or a future course. And then control. So you have a little more control in some ways with an online test. So you can control when and how students can access the test results. So you can make them available for a little while and then turn them off if you would like to. It's a lot easier to create multiple versions of a test because you can have question banks and pools that will not have the same question for every student, or not the same arrangement or order of questions for everyone. And then finally, the grading piece. If you give multiple choice exams online in Canvas or in Publisher software, you probably already know that it's very nice to not have to grade all of those. It can save a lot of time and take human error out of the occasion. So just kind of thinking about what the advantages are before we look at ways that we can improve. So we are going to look at, talk a little bit about the classic type of quizzes, that the assessments that we are all used to taking in a college course, tests and quizzes. Again, this is not going to be a Canvas training webinar, so I'm not going to spend time explaining how to use the quiz engines in Canvas, but you will find videos that are very detailed in the Canvas Faculty Hub on how to use those. But I do want to mention, just because we're sort of trying to get the word out there, that the current quiz engine in Canvas, which is now being called Classic Quizzes, is going to be phased out in the summer of 2024. It was supposed to be this summer, but it's been pushed back, thankfully, by the people at Canvas. I think with the pandemic and everything, they decided it was just too ambitious to try to move everyone to new quizzes this soon. But just so you are aware, since we're talking about tests, that new quizzes is available in Canvas now. And if it is fairly easy to convert your classic quizzes to new quizzes. And I'm not telling you this because this is the topic of this, but I want to just sort of make everyone aware that in 2 years, over 2 years, classic quizzes is going to be gone and new quizzes is going to replace it. And again, there are videos in the Canvas Faculty Hub that will show you how to use both of these quiz engines. And we will be providing training beginning in the fall semester of this year on how to use new quizzes. And any tests that are in classic quizzes can be migrated to new quizzes fairly easily. And then, of course, you have your publisher software. So a lot of courses are using Connect or Alex or MyLab or other third-party publisher software options that make generating, administering, and grading online tests a lot more streamlined than doing all of those things by yourself. So let's talk a little bit about how we can create better test questions. So we have our test tools, our quiz engines that we can use to create those test questions, or maybe import them from a publisher test bank or have them in the publisher software. But just a couple of things, we of course, again, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we're always making sure that those test questions all assess the student learning objectives. So each question is related back to assessing the student's mastery of those objectives. But we also, I want to encourage you to think about tests a little bit differently. And this is not the end all be all, it's just a suggestion to kind of get people thinking a little bit of a different way about tests. So if you are concerned about cheating or concerned about the integrity of your tests, one approach would be to approach each test as if it were open book. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to tell your students that it's open book, although a lot of instructors will. But if students are allowed to use their book or outside resources from the beginning, from the onset, you're facing the fact that they may do that, or you may want to permit them to do that. If you're looking at a test question, and you know the student could just Google it and come up with the answer in 5 seconds, you might want to possibly consider reworking the question. Questions that require students to apply their knowledge to a given scenario, or if you give them a problem and they have to apply that knowledge, are a lot more difficult to cheat on than just the simple recall questions. So that brings up one thing that I think is very critical for creating better test questions, and that is Bloom's taxonomy, looking at those higher level critical thinking skills. And so this is just a very brief, this isn't meant to be a Bloom's taxonomy training webinar, but if we're looking at trying to at least have the students start with this green level here of applying the information. And again, this depends on the course. So maybe in your most basic level courses, remembering and recalling specific facts, which is the very bottom level of Bloom's, that might be all those student learning objectives are requiring them to do, which is fine. But the higher that you get up this pyramid, the higher level thinking that it goes. And so once we get into applying, so taking that information that they know and applying it to a new situation, or even getting up into analyzing, evaluating, and creating, if we're using test questions to have the students take their knowledge and do different things with it instead of just regurgitating facts, then that's going to, first of all, deter cheating, because it's a lot more difficult to cheat on a question that is requiring students to apply their knowledge to a scenario. And one good thing that I read was making the point that assessment prompts learning. So if students are just asked to basically regurgitate facts, which would be down here at these bottom Bloom's levels, then that's what they're going to study for. So if they know that that's all they're going to need to know, then that's as deep as they're going to go to prepare for their exams. But if they are asked in class to synthesize and evaluate and analyze, then that's what they're going to.
Ginny, I think we lost your audio. No, nothing.
All right, how about now?
Yes,
Can
I
you
can
hear
hear
me?
you.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right. So as I was saying, not sure exactly where the audio cut out. I apologize for that, but we're going to aim for these higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And if you're, I have information about that in the hub, but there's also tons of resources out there for how to use Bloom's to create higher level test questions. So here's kind of an example of what I'm talking about. So, and I am not a science person at all, so these are not questions that I came up with, but this would be an example of a lower level Bloom's type of question. So this is just a recall of a fact. So which type of the following cells lack functioning mitochondria? Now this question, again, I don't know the answer to this, but I probably could Google it and Google each of these 4 words that I don't know how to pronounce. And then probably one of the basic things it's going to come up with is that one of these does not have functioning mitochondria. And so again, not necessarily a bad question, but if we're thinking about those higher level Blooms, we might want something more like this. So this is an example of a question that requires an explanation. Again, both of them are multiple choice, so it's not changing the type of question or the format, but this one is asking the students to come up with an explanation for why a mature red blood cell is unable to carry out beta oxidation of fatty acids. Look how well I read that, like I knew what I was talking about, but I have no idea. But this is basically providing that scenario for students. So it's explaining a problem, students have to read that, and then they have to know which of these 4 things is going to be the absence of that is going to be responsible for this result. So looking at creating questions that are requiring a little more of students can help preserve that academic integrity as well. So problem and scenario-based test questions are a similar kind of idea, and usually will end up being the higher level Blooms. So if you can provide a description of a situation or graphs, those types of things that students have to read and interpret, and develop a series of questions that relate back to that material. If they're questions that are requiring students to apply concepts or make a prediction or diagnosis, these are going to, again, be those higher level questions. And then we talked a little bit about data, and I'm going to show you in just a minute what I mean by this. But we can look at test questions that are informed by data either from this semester or from past semester about what works and what doesn't in your exams. So let me go ahead and pull up an example of this. So, and I apologize if I'm showing you something that you do already know, but this is a quiz in a fake class that a lot of fake students have taken. I use this as an example when I'm doing my student training webinars. So you're not seeing any actual student data, but whenever you click on a test or a quiz in Canvas that you have, over on the right-hand side, you'll see the related items and you'll see the quiz statistics in the upper right corner. And I know a few of instructors specifically, I'm sure more than just a few do, but that will use these kind of question breakdowns to really look specifically at the questions at the conclusion of the test to see, again, what they might need to go over, and also sort of to inform the test for the next semester. So if there was a student that a question that a lot of students did poorly on, to sort of look at those questions and see how they might be able to reword it, or if it's something that they need to go over better the next time, or maybe approach that topic a little bit differently. And this is a nice feature of online assessment, because coming up with something like this for a pencil and paper test would, if it's even possible, be extremely difficult and time consuming for you as the instructor to try to come up with something, this type of data, whereas Canvas does this automatically. So I do recommend using this as a way to, again, review for a current course, to look at how you can assist students in that may be struggling, but also if you're looking at tweaking a test, you can always look back and see what things you might need to change a little bit, or might need to reword or cover better or more effectively. So this is a tool that's very easy to use. And again, it's just there. You don't have to actually do anything to cause this to come up. Just click on the name of the quiz and then go to the statistics for the quiz. Okay, so let me get back here. Okay, so let's look at some different types of alternative assessments. And by alternative assessments, I mean besides tests. So tests, of course, are a part of most college courses, and there's nothing inherently wrong with them, but we do want to look at maybe there are other ways that we could assess students besides always the tests. So if you have never used discussions in Canvas, we'll take a look very briefly at what that looks like in just a second. But if you've never used it before, I definitely recommend you giving discussions a try in your course. So here's an example of a discussion that you could use. So in addition to helping create a sense of social presence in the online course, discussions are a great form of formative assessment. So you can check for understanding, uncover and correct misconceptions, because a lot of times in a discussion, a student may be able to express themselves in a way that they wouldn't in a Zoom meeting or in a face-to-face class. They might feel a little bit more comfortable sharing their opinions or their thoughts about something. And especially if you know that there's something that is a commonly misunderstood topic or a common misconception that you kind of want to be on the lookout for, you can always set up a discussion and sort of guide students in that way so you can see how well they're understanding something that is a common problem. And in fact, your students might naturally correct those misconceptions for you in the course of responding to each other. It's kind of interesting to see how sometimes students will be able to sort of correct each other and provide good feedback to each other by responding to someone else's post before you even have to do it yourself. So I really recommend, and again, there is a whole webinar and explanation on how to use discussions effectively. We have a lot of resources for that in the Canvas Faculty Hub. And I do recommend having a couple of things here for a discussion if you're using it as an assessment. So formative or summative, you would want to make sure that you are providing students very specific expectations for what you want to see. And again, especially if it's going to be something that is graded, I would always recommend creating a rubric for it. So here's an example of let me get to my assignment here. Here we go. So for any assignment or discussion, you can add a rubric. I'll click that add rubric button there. And it's a little cumbersome to create. There's a resource in the Canvas Faculty Hub that'll show you how to do this. It's not difficult. It's just, it can be a little bit tedious, but it does make the grading very easy because you can just click on the number of points that the student got. So if they got full points, you can just click there and that will give them the full points in SpeedGrader. So it makes grading those things that are maybe a little bit more subjective, makes it easier and a little more objective than it would be without the rubric. And same for assignments. So both discussions and assignments, you can attach a rubric to them and it makes grading it easy, as well as making sure your students know exactly what they need to do to get full points. Okay, let me get back here. I apologize jumping around a lot, but there's things that I want to show you in Canvas as well as in the PowerPoint. So we're going to keep going back and forth. So another alternative assessment, and this is an idea that's not new, of course, to online learning or to Canvas, but you can do a portfolio of work, and Canvas has a built-in tool called EPortfolio that's nice because it's not associated with any certain course. So students could create as many portfolios as they want or need to within Canvas, and they will always have access to it as long as they still have their Canvas account, but it's not particularly tied to any one course. They can also choose to make it public. So if they wanted to, they could share it with others. And it allows students to display their best work in Canvas, and it can easily be, they can easily take assignments that they have already submitted to Canvas and put them into their ePortfolio. This is an example you can see over on the left-hand side where you can have pretty much as many different artifacts as you want in the portfolio. And I know of some English courses specifically that instructors use this for. It's also a nice way to show a student's progress throughout the course. So you could always have them start with their original piece of work at the beginning of the semester, compare it to their final project. And it's a very nice way to assess, again, what they have learned and how they have mastered those SLOs. You could also use it as a way to share a cumulative project that has different pieces in it, and students the class can view it as well if the student chooses to share it. So this is a nice way, and there is a webinar that Rose did a while back on the ePortfolio tool in Canvas that you can access within the Canvas Faculty Hub as well. And let me show you very quickly where to get to your and or the students' ePortfolios. So if you click on your account button right up in the upper left-hand corner of your Canvas screen, and then click on this ePortfolios link, it'll pull up your ePortfolios page. And I don't really have anything in this yet, but it's nice. There's a wizard that pops up and will show you and or your students how to do this. And then you can also control who can see the portfolio, whether it is, or your students can, whether it is public or private. And then the students can download the contents of their ePortfolio as a zip file. So if they know that they're going to not have access to their Canvas account after they graduate and they want to keep those items, they can always easily do that as well. So it's a nice way to use this as a way to showcase the student's work. Okay, so another alternative assessment idea is an authentic assessment, and some disciplines really lend toward this automatically, but you can always think of things that would allow the assessments to be a little bit more authentic. So we're using real world scenarios or situations students are challenged to apply what they learned in a course to solve a problem or complete a task that could arise in real life. So for example, an education student might be asked to come up with a behavior modification plan for a fictional child in a scenario. I remember having to do that when I was taking the praxis, having to write up a behavior modification plan. Or you could have a nutrition student analyze their own diet and come up with a nutrition analysis or a fitness plan. So there's a lot of ways that we could use these authentic assessments, and they really more reflect the type of thing that the student would probably have to do in real life with whatever they end up using their degree for, rather than just individual questions. This is allowing them to show how they are applying their knowledge that they have learned in the course. Okay, so let's talk about academic integrity. So someone described this the other day, and I found this picture of me in the online exam with all these million notes. First of all, it looks like the student took a lot of notes, so they may not even need all that, but we do have some ways that we can try to ensure that the student is not doing this in the background if that is not how you want them to approach their tests. So the first one I want to mention is unit check. And so if you are already using unit check in your courses, I want to show you one other way that you might not be aware of that you can use it. But unit check is a plagiarism checker, and you can set it up so that when a student submits a paper or an essay, whatever it is, through the assignments tab, that it will automatically run that submission through a similarity check. It searches online, looks for any similarities that it finds, and then it'll give you an originality score. And you can, it's up to you. So it's not going to make the judgment call for you, but it will give you the information you need about what sources they may or may not have used to come up with their paper, and you decide whether or not it's an issue of plagiarism or not. So this can be set up, as I said, within the assignments tab in Canvas. When you set up an assignment, you can check a box that will allow you to have anything automatically run through that plagiarism check. But I also wanted to show you, because this was something that was rolled out last year at some point, and we sent an announcement out about it, but you never know who sees these things or not. So I do want to point out that you now should have a unit check extension, is what they're calling it, in your course. If you don't see it, you might have to go into settings and navigation to enable it, but I believe that it is automatically showing up unless you went in and hit it. But it is visible for you and for your students. And it's nice because you can really use this to check anything that a student submits. So even though you can't set up a test or exam essay question to run through unit check, if you have suspicions, you could always go into the unit check extension and click this little add button here. And then you could either click new blank document, in which case you would just paste the words into it and give it a name. Or you can click this add button and just add a file from your computer. And then it's not immediate. It may take, depending on how long the paper is, it may take a little bit of time, an hour to come up. Shouldn't be much longer than that, but then it will show you. And by the way, this was just something random. This was the directions that the bookstore sent for first day setup. So it found all kinds of issues here. Apparently there are a lot of other schools that are using these exact same directions, which makes sense. So obviously this is not a student paper, but it is kind of cool that it found all of these different places where these same words are found. So you can use this as a source. So it'll highlight what it found that is very close to a match. And then you can look at the source and decide if it's an issue or not. Students can also submit their own work if they would like into the unit check tab. If they are wanting to make sure that they cited everything correctly, that the in-text quotations they put them in quotes, they can always check that themselves just to make sure that everything looks okay before they submit a paper. So this is another way to try and help to preserve that academic integrity with an online paper submission. I want to make sure everyone knows about that. And then, of course, we just rolled out this year Lockdown Browser and Monitor. And there's a lot of resources in the Canvas Faculty Hub about Lockdown Browser and Monitor. If you're not sure what they are, just a brief explanation is it's a separate browser outside of the normal Chrome, Firefox, Edge. Students use this browser to access their course and take their test, and it shuts down all of the other browsing windows and applications on the computer. It does not allow anything to run in the background that might provide students assistance with taking the test. The monitor piece actually records the students, and so it will record them. You can have them show their area, their test space, to make sure they don't have notes glued to the wall. And it will allow you to make them show an ID first. So there's lots of different options. Again, we've got all kinds of training resources for you and for the students in the Canvas Faculty Hub. But in case anybody didn't see that and they're worried about that particular type of thing happening in their online classes, I do want to just reiterate that those things are available for you as well. Okay, so let's talk about some best practices for online tests. Again, beating this dead horse here, student learning objectives. We're always making sure that everything goes back to that. If you are concerned about integrity for types of questions that may be just simple recall, and there are, of course, times where those are the questions that we have that we're testing on, depending on what the content of the course is and the purpose of the assessment. And in that case, I would recommend having a time limit set for your online quiz, just to reduce the amount of time that students could look up the answers if that's something that they would do. Use question banks and question groups so that students are not getting the same questions. So in Canvas, you can set it up so that everything is randomized. There's 100 questions, let's say, in a question set, and each student gets 50. So every student is going to be getting a little bit of a different test, and the questions are going to be in different orders. We recommend mixing it up. So there's lots of different question types that you can use, and with new quizzes in Canvas, there's even more. So have a mix of the true and false multiple choice matching. New quizzes has new ones like putting things in order, and there's a cool tool that you can use called Hotspot, where you can, if maybe for like a biology class or something, if you want to have students label parts of the brain or something, and you would have little places on the picture that the students have to click on and identify. So there's lots of cool things that you can do just beyond the traditional multiple choice questions, which definitely have their place, but it's nice to kind of mix it up a little bit. For the questions that are a little bit of this higher order thinking, consider approaching it as an open book test, and think about what types of questions you can put in there that even if they did have their book, it would still be a challenge and still show that they can apply their information. And there's also some evidence to show that more frequent, shorter tests may be effective rather than having that one final winner takes all high stakes test at the end. And I do have my resources for this, which I will put with the PowerPoint into the Canvas Faculty Hub as well, in case you're interested in that. All right, so I'm going to take a pause here, and I do want to ask if anyone has any questions. Please feel free to go ahead and type those into the chat. Or if you, I think you may, I don't know if I muted everyone again, so if you would rather pipe up and enable your mic, you should be able to do that as well. And while we're waiting for questions, I do want to, as always, put up your support options here. So if you are having trouble with Canvas or you need some assistance with using some of these tools that I've talked about today, if you're new to this and you want to set up a time to work one-on-one with one of us, we are available for you. We're happy to work with you on using these tools. And here are our hours, and you can always contact us by emailing elearning@camdencc.edu. And here we are in all our glory, the e-learning division with our individual email addresses. There's mine. So if you have any questions about the presentation that occurred to you later, you can always shoot me an email. Okay. All right. Are there any questions, Rich?
Yeah, there's one question. It's off topic. I'm addressing it on the text to Nancy.
Oh, okay. Okay, yes, so we should have all of the webinars in that webinar tab in the Canvas Faculty Hub. So I apologize if we don't have last week. So thank you for the reminder. We'll have to make sure that we get that up there. All right, well, thank you so much, everyone. If there's no questions, then we're going to go ahead and close out for the day. But I really do appreciate everyone joining me today. And again, if there's anything that I went over today that you are wanting to learn how to use any of the tools, I know it was a lot in a short period of time, feel free to reach out. We can always set up a time to meet with you or talk to you on the phone or whatever works best for you. We're flexible. And we should have the recording in the Canvas Faculty Hub by the end of the day today. And we'll work to get Dr. Chad's presentation from last week in there as well. All right, thanks so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.